A new economic decision linked to Donald Trump is now creating waves across the global economy. What began as a policy move focused on protecting American industries is quickly turning into a much larger conversation, one that involves global trade routes, international markets, and the future balance of economic power. Several countries are now closely examining the implications of this decision, and early reactions suggest that tensions in global trade relationships could increase if the situation continues to evolve. For supporters of the policy, the move represents a strong effort to defend American economic interests and protect domestic industries. For critics, however, it raises concerns about the possibility of a growing trade dispute that could ripple across the global economy. So, what exactly happened? Why are governments and economists paying so much attention? And could this development signal the beginning of a larger trade rift between major economic powers? In this video, we're breaking down the decision, the global reaction, and what it could mean for the United States and the world economy in the months ahead. Because when the world's largest economies begin adjusting their trade strategies, the consequences rarely stay limited to one country. At the center of the conversation is a new economic step associated with Trump's broader approach to trade policy. For years, Trump has argued that international trade agreements and global supply chains have often placed American industries at a disadvantage. His economic philosophy has consistently emphasized the importance of strengthening domestic manufacturing, reducing reliance on foreign production, and ensuring that American workers remain competitive in the global economy. The latest decision appears to follow that same principle. By adjusting trade policies and economic strategy, the move aims to influence how goods flow into the United States and how American industries compete internationally. Supporters say policies like this can help protect strategic sectors of the economy, including manufacturing, technology, and infrastructure. Critics, however, warn that major policy shifts can sometimes trigger reactions from other countries, especially when those countries believe their own industries could be affected. That possibility is one reason the decision is drawing such widespread international attention. Trade policies are rarely isolated decisions. In today's interconnected global economy, one country's economic strategy can quickly influence supply chains, pricing, and market stability around the world. When a large economy like the United States introduces a new trade policy, businesses and governments in other countries immediately begin evaluating the potential impact. Manufacturers look at how the decision could influence production costs. Investors consider how markets might respond. And governments assess whether the change could affect their own exports or economic growth. This is why economists often say that global trade operates like a network. A single adjustment in one major economy can send signals across international markets. That is exactly why analysts are now studying Trump's latest economic move so closely. Around the world, governments are responding carefully to the development. Some countries have expressed concerns about the potential impact on their industries and export markets. Others are taking a more cautious approach, waiting to see how the situation develops before making major policy adjustments. Allies of the United States are also evaluating how the decision might influence existing trade partnerships. Many of these relationships are built on complex agreements that involve multiple sectors of the global economy. Any change in trade dynamics can require adjustments on all sides. At the same time, rival economic powers are also watching closely. For them, shifts in U.S. trade policy can create both challenges and opportunities depending on how global markets respond. When trade disputes emerge, they rarely escalate overnight. Instead, tensions usually develop gradually as countries respond to each other's economic decisions. One possible reaction is the introduction of countermeasures. Governments sometimes adjust tariffs or introduce new policies of their own in response to trade decisions made by other countries. This back-and-forth dynamic can lead to what economists describe as a trade rift, a situation where economic relationships become increasingly strained. However, it is important to note that many trade disputes eventually lead to negotiations rather than long-term confrontation. Diplomatic discussions often play a crucial role in resolving disagreements before they escalate further. Still, the possibility of growing tension is one reason analysts are paying such close attention to the current situation. Whenever major economic powers adjust their trade strategies, global markets tend to respond quickly, sometimes even before the full details of a policy are fully understood. Investors, multinational corporations, and financial institutions constantly track policy signals from large economies because even a small shift can influence the direction of global commerce. In an interconnected economic system, supply chains stretch across multiple countries and industries. A change in trade policy can affect everything from the cost of raw materials to the final price of consumer goods. When uncertainty enters the picture, businesses often move cautiously. Companies may reconsider where they manufacture products, how they transport goods, and which markets they prioritize for investment. Markets also react to expectations. If investors believe a new trade strategy could disrupt established trade routes or increase costs for certain industries, stock prices and commodity markets may reflect those concerns. Manufacturing firms, technology companies, and energy producers are particularly sensitive to these shifts because their operations often depend on international trade flows. Another factor is investor confidence. Global markets thrive on predictability, and when governments introduce new economic strategies, analysts try to determine whether those changes will create stability or uncertainty in the long term. Even the perception of potential trade friction can influence currency values, investment flows, and long-term business planning. This is why economists and financial analysts are monitoring this situation closely. They understand that trade policy decisions made by major economies can ripple across global markets, shaping expectations, influencing corporate strategies, and potentially redefining how international commerce operates in the months and years ahead. For the United States, the goal behind trade policies like this is often tied to long-term economic strategy. Supporters argue that strengthening domestic industries can help create jobs, increase manufacturing capacity, and improve national economic security. They believe policies that prioritize American production can help the country remain competitive in an increasingly complex global economy. However, trade policies also involve balancing multiple interests. Businesses that rely on global supply chains sometimes worry about higher costs or disruptions. Consumers may also feel the effects if import prices change. Because of this, economic decisions like these often generate significant debate within the United States itself. As the situation continues to unfold, other countries are likely to evaluate several possible responses. Some governments may seek diplomatic discussions aimed at clarifying the intentions behind the policy. Others might adjust their own trade strategies to protect domestic industries. In some cases, countries could explore new trade partnerships or regional agreements as a way to adapt to shifting economic conditions. The global trade system is highly dynamic, and governments often respond to new developments by reassessing their economic priorities. This process can take time, which means the full impact of the decision may not become clear immediately. Several potential paths could emerge from this situation. One possibility is that negotiations and diplomatic engagement help ease tensions, leading to adjustments that maintain stability in global trade relationships. Another scenario involves a period of strategic competition, where countries adapt their policies while avoiding direct economic confrontation. There is also the chance that disagreements intensify if governments introduce countermeasures in response to each other's trade decisions. However, history shows that many trade disputes eventually move toward negotiation and compromise. The direction this situation takes will depend largely on how governments interpret the policy and how they choose to respond. For now, one thing is clear. Trump's latest economic move has sparked a global conversation about the future of trade, economic strategy, and international competition. Governments are watching carefully. Markets are adjusting their expectations. And analysts around the world are debating what the next phase of global trade could look like. But the biggest question still remains. Is this simply a strategic economic signal, or the early stage of a larger trade conflict between major world economies? The answer will likely depend on the decisions made in the coming weeks and months. Until then, The world will continue watching how this story unfolds. And if you want clear explanations of the global developments shaping the economy and international politics, make sure you subscribe and stay connected.